Okay, so there's two reasons you're getting in on the internet right now. One is this Matt
Dude,
Iglesias is confidently wrong about everything article, which you're also getting a great deal.
I thought most
Predominantly
people
you're getting a
like
lot of
that.
support for. Most people love this. Obviously, Matt Iglesias doesn't love it, but we'll get to that in a second. But you're also catching some hell over a tweet about the United Health
Yeah,
CEO shooter.
I know. I know.
So what's
All,
what's
no,
going on there?
no,
What's going on
remember,
there, Nathan?
all I said was that I think something like, live your life in such a way that people will be sad when you die. Which
Yes.
I think is a very basic, incontrovertible piece of life advice. I was pointing to the fact that when this man was killed, which I didn't say, oh, I'm so glad that someone shot that guy. I didn't say that at all. I don't like violence. I think violence generally, CEOs are very fungible, right? You shoot a CEO, they just put a new one in. It's a very useless, it's not a very effective political act. And I don't think it's moral to shoot unarmed people. But all I said was, but notice that when he died, a lot of people weren't very sad about it because of what he did with his life and because of what his
Yeah.
company did and all the suffering they inflicted. And so there's been this torrent which has been widely noted in newspapers of people, instead of mourning this man, talking about all the harm that this man did and the company he ran did. And so I just said, maybe we should all try and aspire to live lives so that, I don't know, the number of laughing emojis on the post about our death doesn't dwarf the number of crying emojis by a factor of 10 to 1, as is true for Mr. Brian Thompson of United Healthcare.
Yeah, and you're referencing like the Facebook post that United Healthcare posted that they had to either take down or turn off the comments of because the ratio was out of control of people, like literally dancing on his grave. So I take a very similar approach to you, Nathan, where my policy is the same as when Trump got COVID in 2020, and there was a very similar kind of atmosphere on the internet. Whereas, like, you will never in a million years finding me yucking anybody's yum when a very bad person meets a very bad fate, even if my own sort of fear of karma slash kind of moral precepts don't allow me to like out loud celebrate anybody's death myself. I guess the death penalty, all of these things would be inconsistent for me to do so. But like, that's why I really was surprised by the reaction to you, because I feel like you're a very similar sort of person. Your comment notably was about other people's celebration, not celebrating yourself, as was mine. Like I had a similar sort of like a take that was like along the lines of look at all of the like these like crazy solidarity among the tweets, like a unanimity of like feeling about this. The Democratic Party, exactly. Maybe someone should capitalize on this like uniform energy that's coming out of this. But that wasn't enough for Ben Shapiro, who quote tweeted you just now saying, live your life in such a way that you aren't a socialist leech on the ass of society, reveling in the murder of people who work for companies you don't like. A way harsh, Ben Shapiro. Now, Nathan, how much do you think this is about Ben Shapiro actually caring about your tweet, and how much is it about you having alienated all of these right-wing hacks with your takedown pieces?
Well, Ben Shapiro famously, has been avoiding actually having a debate with me for many years, ever since I wrote The Cool Kids Philosopher, which goes through and shows that he doesn't know what he's talking about on a series of subjects, and to which he has never responded, right? So he's never actually responded to the arguments that I've made about his work and his positions. So occasionally he snarks and says things like, I don't know who this Nathan Robinson is. But Jordan Peterson does the same thing, where he's like, just makes occasional comments about me because he can't respond to the arguments that I've made. So that's important context for understanding Ben Shapiro calling me a socialist leech. The other point that I made to Ben Shapiro in response is that I am not a leech, objectively speaking, because I have a job. My job is paid for by the subscribers of Current Affairs through transactions made in the free marketplace, right? So people buy magazine subscriptions because they value what I do. I give them opinions in response. I cannot be a leech because the free market has decided that my job is important and I generate value. So I pointed that out to him too, is that by his standards, I generate value. Thank you very much. Economic value. So do you.
Yeah, I mean, it is incredible. Like, there's a genre of take that's like the left, in quotation marks, dancing on this man's grave is exactly why they're so alienated from the mainstream, trying to take what is a very like uniformly felt and very mainstream sentiment and characterize it as kind of an example of the left's excesses when everything is pointing the opposite direction. You already mentioned the Facebook ratio. There, I think, was a New York Times or a Washington Post or something article that they had to turn the comments off on. There was, if you look under the YouTube, in the YouTube comments of any video about this, I mean, everyone is saying the same thing. Here's a snippet of some comments on TikTok. I'm sorry, prior authorization is required for thoughts and prayers.
Just beautiful.
Sending prior authorization, denied claims, collections, and prayers to his family. Was his trip to the ER really emergent? According to his own company, my husband's heart attack wasn't an actual emergency and we were out $3,000. It's crazy what my first thought was. And then I took a look at the comments and realized I'm not alone in my thoughts. I just can't find the care. Maybe if they ask for pre-approval of my care, then after they care, their required deductible, I might be able to supplement some care. I can't even pretend to care. I hope he's looking up at us. I mean, like,
yeah.
Frankly, I was even shocked as someone who has been, I think, relatively lucky with health and the health of their family members at how it seems like every single person in America has a horror story about intense suffering, if not death, that has happened at the hands of an insurance company.
Yeah, that's the thing. This is not an army of leftist trolls descending. And in fact, you'll find out that it's not even just online commenters. If you talk to people in your life who are not particularly political, I was kind of shocked that like some of the reactions when I spoke to just people I know who are not that political. These are people, the core of the sentiment is like rage at what private for-profit health insurance companies do to people. Which is to say that when people are sick, they force them to think about money. They deny them care. The worst point in people's lives, the most difficult point, often the most tragic point, these companies swoop in and try and squeeze money out of you and force you to stay on the phone for hours and hours and hours and fill out endless forms, and then you get denied. And it's just what they do is horrible. What they do to people is horrible, and that's what you see coming out in these comments. It really has nothing to do with leftism. These people are not political. These are just people who understand what the role of a health insurance company in their lives is.
Yeah. And it's worth noting that United Healthcare has, even among the other health insurance companies, the highest denial rate. They've obviously gotten flack for using an algorithm to come to this decision making, which is leaving people fighting basically with a computer at the toughest time in their life. What is it, like a 32% denial rate on claims? They're the worst of a bad bunch. And contrasting that with the obscene payouts that Brian Thompson got in terms of salary, it's an inevitable outcome that this would be the public sentiment. I think what is more confusing, or not confusing, but like frustrating, is seeing Amy Klobuchar and Tim Walz and all of these Democratic leadership figures coming out, not expressing sympathy for the people that Brian Thompson and his organization have harmed, or any kind of even soft understanding of why people are so sort of giddy, frankly, for lack of a better word, about his downfall. But giving thoughts and prayers for this guy, like when you could just be quiet.
Well, it's like when Gaddafi died, right? No one thought, well, we need to send thoughts and prayers to the Gaddafi family for the loss of, when Pinochet died. Well, some Democrats probably said thoughts and prayers when Pinochet died. But, when some foreign dictator dies, nobody. So, but the idea here is that I think it's really important to emphasize that when you say, oh, people are wrong to not care, they should send thoughts and prayers, what about the family? You are implicitly making a judgment about what the guy did with his life. So there's a lot of people who say things like, "Oh, well, how could you say this about what the guy? You're judging the man for." I think Shapiro said something like, "For his job, the job that he did." Well, basically, you are saying that the job he did was innocuous, or that there was nothing deeply immoral about it. Because in the case of, I mean, I'm using dictators as an extreme example. I'm not saying that the United Health CEO is morally the same as Gaddafi. What I'm pointing out is that what people choose to do with their lives does necessarily, beyond a certain point, if you cross a certain threshold, that is going to affect how you feel about their deaths. Because if you feel that that person has brought a lot of suffering into the world, you're not going to be terribly disturbed when their life ends. We know that from how you feel about real villains. So you are kind of implicitly, when you say this, saying, well, that being the CEO of a private health insurance company is not a villainous or especially bad way to spend your life.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth reminding me of two things. One, there was that quote from his wife where she was asked if this was expected or predictable in any way, if there had been any threats and the like. And she said something like, well, there had been some threats. Actually, let me pull up the actual quote. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I remember, yeah, but I don't know the exact quote.
Let me just pull it up 1 second, because I don't want to misquote her, because it was too sort of perfect. She said, yes, there had been some threats, basically. I don't know, a lack of coverage. I don't know the details.
Oh, something. People were saying something about like, oh, my grandma died and you killed. I don't know. It was just gobbledygook to me.
Yeah, and people were reading into that as sort of like aloof disregard for the really visceral and personal complaints that people had been lodging well before this guy was murdered. Yeah. Other people pointed out these are comments under his last LinkedIn post, which are all from before the shooting. And they were like clearly people who have like professional relationships with him and like aren't trying to just like throw tomatoes the way that one might anonymously on the internet. One woman writes, Brian Thompson, this seems like a laudable mission, but United Health Group is failing my mother by not providing her the basic care to get better and back her life. You continue to delay any decision-making and authorizations, which is compromising her health even more. And if she doesn't get back to her baseline, United Health Group is partially responsible. Mm-hmm. Comment after comment after comment. Hey, Brian, I just spent an hour on the phone battling to get general information for my wife with stage 4 cancer. She's a 45-year-old mother of 4 with an abnormal EGFR gene. I'd love to share my experience with you. Here's my cell phone number. United Healthcare terminated my 86-year-old mother's Medicare Advantage plan with no notice on July 31st, 2022. I learned of it when her pharmacy called me. The best I could get by phone was re-enrollment to begin September 1st. Your company left a senior citizen uninsured for 1 month with no mail sent or even email notification. Do better. On and on and on and on. Before, this is not, again, a left-wing mob. This is long before
they don't have. There's no politics in this, right? There's no ideology here. This is just like facts about things that have happened to people.
Yeah, I mean, so the other part of this is that the story has jumped the shark in a even less political way when it comes to the actual shooter who is at large. I will admit to enjoying a genre of tweet about the shooter. He's become, for reasons, a sex symbol. Have you seen any of this?
Well, he has a very winning smile from the picture we've seen. Like people, even the New York Times called it an easy smile. They said an easy smile. Assuming that's even the guy, which I don't even know that we have any proof of. But the police did release a picture of a person of interest who had a nice smile, and then all of a sudden, like, combine that with the fact that he's an assassin and he's the sexiest man of the year.
Exactly. I saw people saying like they're going to have to eliminate all of the women ages like 18 to 34 from the jury pool because they're all too thirsty for him. And I was like, 18 to 34? Don't
Yeah.
cut us elder
Well,
millennials out.
plus every United Health customer,
Yes,
right?
exactly. Exactly. And frankly, like everyone who's ever had,
Have you ever had a health insurance plan?
like, who's left? I saw a genre tweet that said he should participate in the next Timothy Chalamet lookalike contest, which is a thing that's been happening in New York. Then I saw some other people saying, okay, before we crown him Bay, is anyone going to question him getting a Starbucks and breaking the boycott before doing this assassination? I mean, the thing has gotten really, really wild. Between this story and the olfactory thesis woman's
A politics
story,
of smell lady. Yeah.
the politics of smell lady, it's been a kind of banner week for Twitter, for what it's worth.
Every week there's a new character to, you know. This week, Cambridge PhD who wrote a thesis about smells and an assassin. Next week, somebody else.
I mean, okay, but let's get back to this main story, Nathan, because you have, through hard work and by dint of your amazing analytical and argumentative skills, become the character of the week with your takedown of Matt Yglesias. Tell us why you chose to write Matt Iglesias is confidently wrong about everything.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, because a lot of people have been, you get a lot of people going, well, that's not true. It's not literally everything. Here's a thing he said that was technically correct. So I just want to clarify.
Well, that's
that
what
I am
he said
using
too, right?
comic hyperbole. Oh, I haven't seen. He's blocked me and Current Affairs for years, so I haven't seen what he's said, if anything. But
yeah, he literally he chose the pedant's route and made that exact argument.
I cannot possibly be literally wrong about everything. This morning I said I am drinking a cup of coffee. Was I wrong about that? Okay, all right.
Exactly.
Really, let's. The actual thesis of the piece is that Matt Yglesias, who is a very, popular. Not, I wouldn't say, because he's not well known to the general public, but certainly popular among high-ranking Democratic Party elites and within the Biden administration. This kind of wonky blogger. That basically his analysis is very poor and unreliable, and that I don't think people should listen to it. Now, and that also it's very smug and dismissive of people who disagree with him in a way that gets under people's skin, and then and because he doesn't take their moral concerns seriously, it really upsets them, and then he kind of uses the fact that they're upset as further proof that he's superior in his rationality, and they are just being hysterical or whatever, and they're not really interested in a serious discussion. And so that's the core critique, is that I think that this man has a very negative impact on our political discourse, which he's formed a prominent part of for 20 years now. And I go through and I have lots of examples of things he said that I think are either wrong or deeply unfair to people who disagree with him, or misrepresent those people, or are just kind of cruel and nasty. Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about some of those, because I know you're loath to do this, and it is beneath you or anyone to have to engage so competently and so specifically with a person like this, whose whole MO is not having any analytical rigor whatsoever. It feels, so I think you say in this piece somewhere that it's like having a debate with a toddler about a generally known principle like gravity or something. But I do think it's useful because, as you point out, he does have this sort of outsized influence. He has met with and ostensibly advised Joe Biden. he is the kind of person who, as you mentioned, might not be a household name, but is very much a household name to the opinion makers and taste makers of the world and the politicos and pundits. And he has very much carved out a role for himself as the reasonable centrist in the room.
Yeah.
And his entire sort of persona is based in the idea of being able to minimize any other opinions, particularly opinions from the left, by dismissing them as childish, unsubstantiated,
unserious, right? Well, I'm one of the serious, but this is a posture that people in DC kind of strike up, centrists often, which is we are the serious, pragmatic people. We understand how politics works. You are a bunch of children. You think emotionally. I point out that there is a slight sexist undercurrent that comes into this, because he said something like, your socialist niece who posts about Genocide Joe. And it's like, well, why did you say niece there? Like, there is very much something about like, I am cool reason and you are hysteria, you the left. And and I care about the data and the facts, and I look in detail at policy, and you don't do that. You just think magically. He's used like the word magical, magical thinking. His blog is called Slow Boring, and it's not just because he's boring, it's because it's like it's the Max Weber quote about the politics is the slow boring of hard boards. And he says like politics is hard, it's slow, it's incremental, it's detailed, and those of you who want transformative change, you're essentially ignorant. Now, these aren't like exact quotes, but I think I have enough exact quotes in the piece to kind of substantiate that I think that is the general current that runs through his thought.
Yeah, let's go to some of these exact quotes. I think the part, like I have written down in the margins here, is he a sociopath? When you are walking through his arguments against climate change. I mean, look, what's so funny is like liberals, you don't call it climate change denialism because that's like a goofy thing that we associate with, Bush 2 or something. It's passé. Even Republicans aren't generally out openly saying like climate change isn't real. But I don't know how else to characterize this other than a sort of climate denialism. So let walk us through his take on some of these climate issues.
Well, I mean, he said that he has a big thing on why Kamala Harris was right to embrace fracking, and why it's good for the American economy. He has said that I would just want to find his quote about. He says it's weird to care about. He doesn't deny that climate change is real, but he says that it's weird to care about climate change because the harms are inflicted mostly on foreigners and mostly in the future. One of the things that is that he consistently displays is this like difficulty in understanding how people might have empathy. Like, that's, I think, why you might have written, is he a sociopath? Because when he talks about, like, the Palestinian movement, he's like, I understand why Rashida Tlaib would care about Palestinians, but why would anyone else? And it's like, well, I don't know. Maybe there's this thing called caring about other people. And so, this idea, wow, it's real weird to care about, like, foreigners in the future. You're like, oh, you mean other people? The people who are not you? And, when he was actually protested by climate change protesters because of his support of the fossil fuel industry, and he found it just bizarre and hilarious that anyone would protest him. I mean, he just seems to think that he's called... when the Biden administration argued in court that, there was no constitutional right to a stable climate system, there was this effort to say, well, because people are trying to use whatever tool they can to fight climate change. So, okay, well, what if we made a legal argument that we have a constitutional right to a stable climate system? And of course, the Biden administration opposed this. And, Iglesias said that showed that Biden was moderate and sensible, and that leftists were psychos. He called them psychos, and he says as well. I have a quote where he's dismissing like a poem about the genocide, saying that like it shows that leftism and mental illness are kind of like interchangeable categories, or the boundary between them is porous. On climate, though, it kind of exemplifies one of the things that I think is the problem with his whole approach, which is not only does he not understand why people would have an emotional reaction to suffering, which is why he was kind of shocked when people were surprised 10 years ago when he said, after the Bangladesh factory collapse, he said, well, but there are different labor standards in different countries. And people are like, yes, but thousands of people are dead. He's like, oh, you care about that? Right. So not only does it show that like he doesn't quite understand why people care about other people, but also I think the climate, the way he writes about climate shows that this posture of seriousness is fake. Because in his fracking article, and oftentimes when he writes about this, he talks about, well, the importance of the fossil fuel industry to the American economy. It's like, okay, but what about all of the harms of climate change?
Hey, YouTube. Thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.